Someone was like said that Mooch was lying. Hillary couldn't fix the state-run primaries, and how do you say she fixed that?
And his expertise is based on.
Okay, well, listen. I mean, just you just Google Hillary Clinton, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and Bernie Sanders, and you could read the news stories, and you could read the release of Podesta's emails related to the super delegates. And just so for that listener's knowledge, the Democrats have done away with their super delegates. So they had a group of delegates that, if you voted in the state of Michigan, you received those delegates. But the super delegates had an override irrespective of the vote in that state. And
Chris, I never quite understood the super delegate.
Yeah, so Hillary Clinton basically gamed those super delegates. I'm actually not lying. I don't need to lie.
No.
Go to Fahrenheit 11.
9/11?
No, Fahrenheit 11/9.
Oh, okay.
Michael Moore's new documentary.
Okay.
Michael Moore's obviously a devout liberal Democrat.
Yes.
And he'll show you in the documentary the factual context related to the setup against Bernie Sanders. So no need for me to lie. Just those are the places that I can factually reference for those people.
And one of the things, just open your eyes during that time frame. I never heard one single Hillary supporter during that campaign. It was all Bernie, and then out of nowhere, she won. So it was just, it was, and even the Teamsters kind of knew what was going on because they always, will say recommend this is who they're going to be. This is who they endorse. They never once said anything until after Hillary won the primary, which all the other union organizations did.
If you would do me a favor, either back off your mic just a touch or turn your volume down because you're coming through way stronger than the rest of us.
All right, sorry about that.
And we have a Dean's List recipient.
She made it. She's taken Tucow out for a minute.
Okay.
Well. So one of the things I was going to say is, again,
that was everybody.
This kind of goes back to the Catholic versus the world comment. One thing I've noticed, and this came up a lot during the Obama administration, is people labeling various candidates the Antichrist, especially on the liberal side, saying that they're going to unify the world, that they're too popular, they're too well beloved. And I think that's one of the things that shocked me is that when Trump ran, the evangelicals, who tend to be the most moralistic, that tend to be the most, I'm not really sure the word that I'm looking for, but they tend to put themselves up on a pedestal over the rest of us. Then you can get into the Calvinists and the rest of them who have various opinions, but
a prima donna type of thing.
Not necessarily prima donna, but they just tend to believe that they have the moral high ground.
Okay.
They look to a man like Trump, who clearly is not moral, or at least not traditionally moral. And they see him as being their candidate, whereas these people who do lead, at least publicly, moral lives.
Why do the evangelicals back him so strongly?
Well, that's what I'm getting into.
Okay.
But it seems as though they want to have this chaotic candidate because he will protect their interest more than he will represent their ideology. Do you think that in the long run that's going to damage their voter base, or do you think that's something that they're going to be able to look past for the foreseeable future?
Phenomenal question, and it obviously demonstrates what I think is great insight into the body politic right now. And so my short answer is those voters are driven by the Supreme Court and the social issues related to the court. They want things like Roe v. Wade overturned and marriage equality and things like that overturned. And so the president is putting up very super conservative judges, not just at the Supreme Court level, but there's 98 or so judges that he's nominated at the federal level. So, So they have, which is, the word politics in our country and in other countries and throughout history is closely aligned with the word hypocrisy. And so, we're all hypocrites to varying degrees, but this is blatant, billboard sized, with very high laser light smoke and mirror show of hypocrisy. So they talk about a literal interpretation of the Bible, and they talk about living with a certain standard of moral rectitude. And, the president, by his own admission and by the facts of his life, has not followed suit to that evangelical community yet. He is wickedly popular with them.
He is.
And I think it's directly related to policy and specifically judicial appointments.
What is your opinion on why the Southern poor gravitate to Trump? So is it that he shows them something that they all want to have? Like West Virginia, all 120 counties in West Virginia voted for Trump. 66% of Kentucky voted for Trump. And then you get into Alabama, Mississippi, all the southern states, South Carolina. Lots of poor people love Trump. Why is that?
Well, let's talk about the first two states are coal related. Trump's policies were super strong on the coal industry, but the other states are more related to what I wrote about in my book, The Blue Collar President. And so what I say in the book is that blue collar people, lower income and lower, poor people, or however you want to describe them, have really not had a faithful advocate since Lyndon Johnson. And so those people, which were traditionally Democrats, they were the Franklin Roosevelt coalition, have gone by the wayside, and they felt like there's been a vacuum of advocacy over the last 35 years. A result of which, in comes Trump. He goes into those areas.
Yeah.
He's saying to them something they like hearing. What do you have to lose? Can't get any worse than it is now.
Good point.
And they said, yeah, what do we got to lose? And they started voting for him. But I do think, pursuant to Chris's comment, a lot of those votes are protest votes. A lot of those votes are anger-based votes. A lot of those votes are, wake up, Mr. or Mrs. Politician. This is not working for me and my family.
Yeah.
When bringing up the coal miners, it's interesting to me to look at the American history and to look at how this country has kind of developed through migration, not from other countries, but from state to state, city to city, and region to region, is that it seems as though industries would come and go and people would kind of abandon their posts. They would leave. That's how we developed ghost towns from mining in the 1800s and early 1900s. Yet it seems that now people cling to their area more than they did in those days. Of course, you always had the people who lived in the Appalachian Mountains and who would never leave, even once the opportunities dried up. But now it seems as the people in these communities in Eastern Kentucky and West Virginia and places like that don't want to leave, and they expect this industry that, for better or worse, is fading away. People are getting away from coal. It doesn't have the longevity that it did. Don't want to leave, and they expect the politicians to keep an industry around that is on life support. Why do you think that the politicians are feeding into this instead of trying to do re-education programs or just saying, hey, look, this isn't working, you need to find something else?
They don't seem to feed into that comedian that said, go to where the food is. They don't seem to be doing that.
Well, I sort of said this at the beginning of our conversation, that like the politicians are so short term in their orientation and they have no long-term planning. Like an honest person would be in that area and say, listen, I'm sorry, because of technological innovation, these industries are going into the ground, but here is a 5 to 15 year technical training program that we're going to pay for, that's going to help you and your family retool into higher incomes for yourself. It'll be a painful transition, but trust me, we're going to get there together. But that's not what they're doing. They're doing the short-term thing was, hey, I got 60 some odd counties voting for me. I said the right jingoistic, short-term palliative, and people knee-jerk respond to it. But here's the thing. The question really is, if you had a legitimate person, man or woman, who was a great public servant, and basically said, okay, here is the tax dollars, and taxes are a price for services. That's ultimately what they are. That's why people are so upset. The taxes are high and the services suck. And so, but if you said, okay, here's our money, we're going to allocate it propitiously and efficiently, but by the way, your industry's dying. And so as a government should be, the government should not be responsible for equal outcomes. That's absolutely impossible. And we've learned that through the 150-year experimentation with socialism and communism, that equal outcomes are impossible to achieve, even if you try to systematize them. But what a good government should be is about equal opportunity. And so we should be in those areas with some level of money. I mean, you spent $3.5 trillion in Iraq and Afghanistan. Don't you think we could have spent that money in places in our own country that could have benefited from the use of that money in training and reindustrialization and infrastructure? And
I would like a bank account with $3 trillion and see what I could do to help people.
Probably buy Filipino girls dinner, but it's one of those things that I've noticed that it seems as though a lot of the evangelical voters I see are talking about, and this again comes from Facebook and Twitter, and you can never really trust that to be a true a true compass of where people are. But it seems as though they talk a lot about the end of the world, and they want
12
this.
years, according to some people.
Yeah, they want the rapture. They want Jesus to come back. They want the judgment. And you see this through a lot of what they post. Trump is the chosen candidate of God, all these crazy, crazy things. And I wonder, since you've been in there with him, what is his view of this? Does he buy into this? Does he look at this as the truth? Does he want this, or is this just a means to an end to him?
Well, I would say, buy into it is probably too strong, but I have been with him where he has spoken at these evangelical conventions. We did one in the summer of 2016 at the Marriott Marquis in Times Square. I attended that, and he was interviewed, I think, by Jerry Falwell Jr. And Jerry's a great guy. And I think where Trump has come out on this stuff is that he's leaned on the side of redemption. He's basically saying, yep, I probably haven't lived the most Christian life, or I probably haven't lived a life without sin, but I'm searching for redemption, and I'm searching to improve my lot in life. And I think that they've been receptive to that. So, to me, here's what I would say about Trump. For all of his flaws, I've been in the situations with him, and I've seen his decision making, and I would tell you that he makes very common sense, very cautious decisions in life or death situations. And by the way, the guy Cliff Sims, who wrote a very mean and nasty book about Trump like 2 or 3 weeks ago, said the same thing. So, I'm a Trump supporter. He turned on Trump. Even Omarosa, who was disappointed and got fired brutally by Trump, he turned on him as well. She also had to admit that in those situations, she's also seen his common sense level of orientation. So,
I have
more common sense and less religious, if you will.